You ever look at someone and just know they're in the wrong place? Not like accidentally. I don't mean walking into a wrong meeting or sitting at someone else's table at a wedding. I mean the kind of wrong place that feels like a slow-motion car crash. The kind where your stomach drops before your brain even understands why. That's what I felt the second I saw him step out onto that balcony. And I was only there to take pictures of the flowers. London in October is a specific kind of gray. Not angry, not sad, just heavy. The sky sits low, like a ceiling you can almost touch. Tourists still pack the sidewalks outside Buckingham Palace, wrapped in cheap rain jackets, and those ridiculous Union Jack hats that smell like plastic and regret. I was killing time before meeting my sister at a pub near Victoria. She'd texted me, "Don't be late for once," and I'd ignored it because that's what younger brothers do. Instead, I wandered toward the palace gates with a coffee that had gone lukewarm and a phone full of photos I'd never look at again. There was a crowd, maybe a couple hundred people. Nothing like summer crowds, just the dedicated ones, the Americans ticking boxes on their bucket lists, the Japanese tourists with matching fanny packs, a few school groups from somewhere in northern England, judging by the accents. The changing of the guard had already happened. I knew because I saw a kid crying about missing it. His dad was trying to explain something about schedules while looking at his phone, defeated in that way parents get when they've failed at something small, but it feels big. So it was just quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after an event, when people linger because they don't know where to go next. I leaned against a lamppost and watched the guards in their tall black fur hats. They stood like statues at the front gates. You could almost forget they were human if you didn't notice the slight shift of weight every few minutes, or the way one of them blinked exactly 3 times in a row. Then, a black Range Rover pulled up to a side gate I hadn't even noticed before. Not unusual. Those cars come and go all day. Staff, officials, someone's assistant running late with paperwork. But this one stayed. And then another one came. Darker windows. No plates I could see from where I stood. A ripple went through the crowd. Not a wave. More like the way water shivers before a stone breaks the surface. People started looking, pointing, pulling out phones. Someone behind me said, "Is that him?" And someone else shushed them like we were in a library. The palace doors opened. Not the big front ones, a smaller door to the left, the kind that probably leads to a hallway with bad lighting and a water cooler. A man stepped out. He was tall, not in a movie star way. More in a way that seemed tired, like his height was something he'd stopped thinking about years ago. Gray suit, dark tie. His hair was the kind of silver that happens when someone stops pretending they're still young. He wasn't a king. I knew that immediately. Not because I'm some royal expert. I'm not. I don't follow the family tree or care about who wore what tiara when. But I've seen the king on enough screens to know his face. The way he holds his chin. The way he never quite looks comfortable in his own skin. This man looked comfortable. Too comfortable. He walked toward the crowd with a small, practiced smile. Not a politician smile. More like a grandfather who's about to ask if you've eaten enough. People started clapping. Hesitant at first, then louder. He raised one hand. Waved. And here's the thing that still gives me chills when I think about it. No one questioned it. Not one person in that crowd said, "Hey, that's not the king." Because why would they? You see a man in a nice suit walk out of Buckingham Palace, wave at you like he owns the place, literally, and your brain fills in the blanks. Must be him. Looks different in person. Maybe he lost weight. We want to believe the story we're given. It's easier than asking questions. Build tension, he stopped about 20 feet from the gates. Close enough to see the lines around his eyes. Close enough to notice his shoes, brown leather, scuffed at the toes. The king would never wear scuffed shoes. Someone would get fired over scuffed shoes. But nobody else noticed. He started talking. I couldn't hear the words from where I stood, but his voice carried in that way some voices do. Not loud, but present. He was thanking people for coming, for their patience, for their warmth, which was funny because it was about 12 degrees and spitting rain. A woman next to me started crying. Genuine tears. She kept saying, oh my God," into her phone while recording. I watched his face, and I saw something that made my coffee taste like nothing. He wasn't looking at the crowd. Not really. His eyes moved too fast, scanning, checking. He wasn't seeing people. He was seeing space, distance between bodies, exit routes, the way a deer looks at a field before crossing it. That's when I noticed the men. 3 of them, spread out in the crowd. Not together, but connected. Same dark jackets. Same way of standing with their hands loose, but ready. One of them had an earpiece. The others didn't need one. They just moved when he moved, like shadows with shoulder holsters. This wasn't a royal appearance. This was a decoy. I'd heard about it before. Read some article years ago about how certain leaders use body doubles for high-risk events. Thought it was conspiracy theory stuff, the kind of thing my uncle brings up at Christmas to make everyone uncomfortable. But here it was. Real. Happening 50 feet away while a retired teacher from Ohio filmed it for her grandkids. The Knot King kept talking. Something about a charity. Something about service. The words didn't matter. What mattered was the rhythm of it. The way he paused in the right places, nodded at the right moments, tilted his head like he was listening even though he was just waiting for his cue. And then someone shouted, "Your Majesty!" Over here. A man in the front row. Mid-30s. Unshaven. Red jacket zipped all the way up even though it wasn't that cold. He was holding something. Not a phone. A piece of paper? No. Too thick. My brain stuttered. The Knot King turned toward the sound. Smiled. Started to step forward. And the man in the red jacket moved. Not fast. Not slow. Just purposeful. The way someone moves when they've been waiting for something, and it's finally happening. The shadows moved too. The 3 men in dark jackets closed space like magnets, finding metal. But they were too far. Spread too thin. The crowd was between them and him. The man in red was 3 steps from the gate. The Knot King was 2 steps from the gate. They were going to meet. Right there. Right in front of everyone. I remember thinking, this is how it happens. Not in a movie. Not with music swelling. Just a Tuesday. A crowd. A man in a red jacket. Climax, the first shadow reached the gate. Not one of the dark jacket men. Someone else. A woman. Blonde hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful. She was wearing a Royal Guard uniform. The real kind, with the gold buttons and the ceremonial belt. I'd seen her standing by the side entrance earlier and thought she was just decoration. She wasn't decoration. She moved between the Knot King and the man in red like she'd been shot out of cannon. No sound. No warning. Just there, suddenly, her hand on the man's chest, stopping him cold. "Step back," she said. Quiet. Firm. The kind of voice that doesn't ask twice. The man in red tried to push past her. I just want to give him this. Step. Back. The other shadows arrived. Dark jackets. Earpieces. Hands where hands shouldn't be seen, but were definitely ready. The crowd went silent. That real silence. The one where everyone stops breathing at the same time. Even the crying woman stopped crying. Her phone was still recording, but she'd forgotten about it. Her mouth was open. The Knot King hadn't moved. That's what got me. He hadn't taken a single step backward. His hands were still at his sides. His smile was still there, though smaller now. Tighter. He looked at the man in red. Really looked at him. Not like a king looking at a subject, like a man looking at another man, seeing something the rest of us couldn't. "It's all right," he said. The blonde guard didn't move. "Sir, I strongly advise." I said it's all right. He stepped around her. 1 step. 2. He was at the gate now. Inches from the metal bars. Inches from the man in red. The dark jacket men were frozen. Caught between protocol and reality. Their job was to protect him. But their job was also to not cause a scene. A scene meant questions. Questions meant exposure. The Knot King reached through the gate. Opened his hand. The man in red stared at it. His face had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something softer. Confusion, maybe, or relief. It was hard to tell. "Go on," the Knot King said. "Whatever it is, give it to me." The man looked down at the thing in his hands. It was a letter. Just a letter. A thick one, folded badly, the kind you write when you've got too much to say and not enough words. The edges were soft from being held too long. He handed it over. The Knot King took it. Didn't look at it. Just held it against his chest like it was something precious. "Thank you," he said. The man in red started crying. Not the quiet kind. The ugly kind, shoulders shaking, breath catching, the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding something together for too long and someone finally let you put it down. The blonde guard stepped back. The dark jacket men relaxed by millimeters. The crowd, which had been holding its breath, let out a collective exhale that sounded like wind through leaves. And the Knot King just stood there, holding the letter, letting the man cry. For a moment, just a moment, I forgot he wasn't real. Forgot he was a stand-in, a body double, a man paid to wear a gray suit and wave at strangers. Because in that moment, he was the most real person I'd ever seen. Resolution, the guards escorted the man and read away. Not roughly, gently almost. One of the dark jacket men put a hand on his shoulder and said something I couldn't hear. The man nodded, wiped his face with his sleeve, walked between them like a child being led to the principal's office, but without the fear. The Knot King watched them go. Then he turned back to the crowd. His smile returned. Full, bright, like nothing had happened. Who's got a good camera? He asked. I need a new photo for the Christmas card. People laughed. Nervous laughter at first, then real. Someone raised a hand. Someone else shouted me. Pick me. He walked along the gate, shaking hands through the bars, taking selfies with teenagers, letting a toddler touch his sleeve. The crowd swarmed around him like he was a rock star at a meet and greet. The blonde guard stayed close. The dark jacket men reformed their perimeter. But the energy had changed. Whatever danger had been there, whatever the man in red had intended, it was gone now. Diffused. Handled. I watched for another 10 minutes. Then I checked my phone. My sister had texted, "Where are you?" And then, "You're going to be late again, aren't you?" And then, "I'm ordering without you," I typed back. On my way, but I didn't move. Couldn't. My feet were stuck to the pavement. My brain was still trying to process what I'd seen. A body double. A decoy. A man who looked enough like someone else to fool a crowd, but who had just done something the real king probably couldn't do. He'd listened. He'd stayed. He'd taken a letter. He'd taken a target off someone else's back and put on his own, because that's what the man in red was. Not an assassin, not a terrorist, just someone with a letter and nowhere else to send it. Someone who'd been carrying something heavy and found the only person in London willing to hold it for a minute. The Knot King finished his rounds, gave one last wave, walked back toward the small door with the bad lighting and the water cooler. The blonde guard opened the door for him. He paused at the threshold, and he looked back, not at the crowd, at me. I swear to you, at me. He nodded, just once. Small, like he was saying, "You saw what you saw." Then he disappeared inside. The door closed. The crowd started to drift away, already forgetting, already reaching for their phones to post the photos, to tell their friends they'd met the king. But they hadn't. And I couldn't stop thinking about the man in red. Where they'd taken him. What was in that letter? Whether anyone would ever read it. Whether it even mattered. Ending line, I walked to the pub and found my sister already halfway through a plate of fish and chips. She asked if I got any good pictures. I said no. But that wasn't true. I got one. A blurry shot of the Knot King's face right before he took the letter. You can't see his eyes clearly. You can't see the way his smile changed. But I remember it. And the thing I remember most is this. When you take a king's place, even for 10 minutes, you don't just borrow his crown. You borrow his cross. Part 2 hook. The thing about becoming a target is you usually don't know it's happened until it's too late. There's no warning sign, no letter in the mail, no ominous music playing in the background. One minute you're just a person living your life, and the next minute, without any say in the matter, you're not. You're a target, which means someone out there has decided you matter. Not in a good way, in a way that keeps them up at night, in a way that makes them plan, practice, prepare. I learned this 3 days after the balcony. Not from briefing, not from a handler, from a bullet hole in my kitchen window. Set up his name was Michael Cross, though that wasn't his real name. None of it was real. Not the name, not the face he wore in public, not the slight limp he'd developed from fall off a horse he'd never ridden. Michael was a body double, not the movie kind, not the kind that shows up at premieres and poses for photos while the real celebrity hides in a trailer. The serious kind, the kind governments don't talk about and journalists can't confirm, the kind that signs contracts with no names on them and gets paid in accounts that don't exist. He'd been doing it for 12 years. Started with a minor European official who looked enough like him to be his brother. Graduated to bigger roles, bigger risks, bigger paychecks. And now he was here. London, October, standing in a third-floor flat that smelled like old tea and newer fear, watching the news coverage of his own performance. They'd given him a good edit. The cameras had been far enough away that no one could see the differences. The slightly broader shoulders, the grayer hair, the way he moved his hands when he talked. On screen, he looked like the king. On screen, he was the king. He turned off the television. The flat was quiet except for the radiator hissing in the corner and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. He'd been here 3 weeks, long enough to learn which floorboards creaked and which taps dripped, not long enough to feel safe. He never felt safe. That was the job. His handler, a woman named Davis who wore sensible shoes and never smiled, had debriefed him 2 hours after the balcony incident. She'd watched the footage back with him in a room with no windows, pointed out 3 moments where he'd almost broken character, told him to do better next time. There was always a next time, but she'd also mentioned the man in red, the one with the letter. Turned out he wasn't a threat after all, just a former soldier with a grievance about his pension and a desperate need to be heard. The letter was 37 pages of handwritten complaints about administrative errors. No explosives, no poison, just paper and desperation. They'd let him go after 6 hours of questioning, told him to stay away from royal events, gave him a leaflet about mental health resources. Michael had asked what was in the letter. Davis had said it wasn't his concern. He'd let it go. That was also the job. Build tension 3 days later. Michael woke up at 5:47 a.m., not because of an alarm, because of sound. A sound that didn't belong in a flat where every sound had been cataloged and memorized. He lay still in the dark. His heart was doing the thing it did, the slow, deliberate beat that came from years of training his body not to panic. He counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3. The sound came again. Glass. Breaking. Not loudly. Deliberately. Someone was cutting a window pane somewhere in the flat. Michael moved. Not toward the sound, away from it. He rolled off the bed onto the floor, silent as shadow, and pressed himself against the wall. His hands found the floorboard under the bed, the one he'd loosened on his first night. He lifted it, reached inside. The gun was cold. It was always cold. He checked the safety, chambered around. The motions were automatic, muscle memory from 1,000 drills in 1,000 safe houses. The sound stopped. That was worse. Silence meant they were inside. Silence meant they were listening. Michael crawled to the bedroom door. The floor was hardwood, cold against his knees. He'd left the door open a crack. Always left it open. Closed doors were traps. Closed doors are where you died. He peered through the gap. The hallway was dark. The kitchen was at the end, past the bathroom and the small closet where he kept nothing important. The kitchen was where the window was. The kitchen was where the sound had come from. He waited. 1 minute. 2. 3. The radiator hissed. The traffic hummed. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Sounds that meant the world was still turning, still pretending everything was fine. Then he saw it. A shadow. Moving across the kitchen floor. Not a person, a reflection. The moonlight was catching something metallic, something being carried low and slow. Michael made a decision. He didn't shout, didn't announce himself, didn't give away his position like they did in the movies. Instead, he slipped through the door, down the hall, keeping his back to the wall, his gun pointed at the floor. The kitchen door was open. He could see the window now, the one above the sink. The glass was intact. No cuts, no products. The sound hadn't come from the window. It had come from the door. Someone had picked the lock. Someone was already inside. Michael stopped breathing. The shadow moved again. Closer. A shape in the darkness, human-sized, moving with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly where you were going. Michael raised the gun. Don't. 1 word. Quiet. Flat. The kind of voice that didn't bluff. The shadow stopped. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The flat held its breath. The city outside kept spinning, oblivious, full of people who would never know that in a third-floor walk-up on a quiet street, 2 men were having a conversation without words. Then the shadow spoke. You're not him. Not a question. An observation. The voice was young, younger than Michael expected. 25, maybe. 26. The accent was local. London. Somewhere south of the river. No, Michael said. I'm not. But you look like him. Close enough. The shadow shifted. A sliver of light from the street caught his face. Young. Dark hair. Eyes that had seen too much too fast. He was holding something, not a gun. A knife. Long blade. The kind that did more than cut. They said you'd be at the palace, the young man said. They said he'd be there. The real one. They were wrong. Yeah. The young man's voice cracked. I see that now. Michael kept the gun steady. His finger was on the trigger, but his mind was somewhere else, calculating distances, angles, outcomes. The young man was 5 feet away. Too close for a knife. Too far to disarm without getting cut. Put the knife down, Michael said. Can't. You can. You're choosing not to. The young man shook his head. His hand was trembling now, the blade catching the light in small, nervous flashes. You don't understand. I came all this way. I planned everything. I was supposed to what? Michael's voice softened. Not much. Just enough. Kill him? Make a point? Change something? Silence. I had a sister, the young man said finally. The words came out like they hurt. She worked at the embassy. The one in Istanbul. 3 years ago. There was a bomb. Michael didn't say anything. He'd heard this story before. Different names, different cities, same shape. Grief turned to anger. Anger turned to planning. Planning turned to a dark kitchen and a knife and a target that wasn't even the right one. I'm sorry, Michael said. Sorry doesn't bring her back. No, it doesn't. The young man's hand stopped trembling. That was worse. Steady hands meant a decision had been made. Michael tensed, ready to move, ready to... The knife clattered to the floor. The young man dropped to his knees. Not dramatically. Not like an actor in a play. Just collapsed. The way people do when the thing holding them up finally gives way. Michael lowered the gun. Not all the way. He wasn't stupid. What? Enough. I don't even know what I'm doing here, the young man whispered. I don't even know what I wanted. Climax, Michael crossed the kitchen in 3 steps. Kicked the knife under the refrigerator. Kept the gun trained on the young man's chest. Then he crouched down. I level. Listen to me, he said. You have 2 choices. 1, I call my people. They come here. They take you somewhere you don't want to go, and you don't come back. Ever. The young man looked up. His eyes were wet. His face was the face of someone who'd already lost everything, and was just now realizing it. What's the second choice? Michael hesitated. This was the part they didn't train you for. The part no manual covered. The moment when the target and the hunter looked at each other and saw the same thing. 2 men who'd ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, carrying weights they'd never asked for. You walk out that door, Michael said. You go home. You find something else to live for. And if I don't, then I'll see you again. Michael stood up, stepped back, and next time I won't talk first. The young man stared at him for a long time. Then he got to his feet. Slow, unsteady, like a baby deer learning to stand. He looked at the refrigerator, at the knife underneath it, then at Michael. You're not what I expected, he said. No one ever is. The young man walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Didn't look back. Tell your people to fix the lock, he said. It's cheap. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut. Footsteps on the stairs. Fading. Disappearing into the London morning. Michael stood in the dark kitchen for a long time. The gun hung heavy in his hand. His heart was finally beating fast now, the adrenaline catching up, the fear arriving late like an uninvited guest. He thought about calling Davis, about reporting the breach, about the protocols and procedures and paperwork that would follow. Instead, he put the gun on the counter, walked to the window, looked out at the street below. The young man was crossing the road, walking fast now, head down, hands in his pockets. Just another figure in the gray October morning. Just another person carrying something heavy. Michael watched until he turned the corner and disappeared. Then he went back to bed. He didn't sleep. Resolution Davis showed up at 8 a.m. She must have heard about the breach through whatever network watched the watchers. She didn't knock, just let herself in with a key Michael didn't know she had. She found him at the kitchen table, drinking tea that had gone cold an hour ago. The gun was still on the counter. The knife was still under the refrigerator. Report, she said. Michael told her. Everything. The break-in, the conversation, the choice he'd made. Davis listened without interrupting. Her face didn't change. When he finished, she stood in silence for a full 30 seconds. Then, she said, "You should have called. Probably. He could have killed you. He didn't. He could come back." Michael looked at her, really looked at her, at the sensible shoes and the permanent frown and the job that had eaten her alive years ago without her noticing. "He won't," Michael said. "How do you know?" "Because I saw his face. He wasn't a killer. He was a kid who got lost." Davis opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time since Michael had known her, she didn't have a protocol for what to say. "I'm pulling you out," she said finally. "New location, new identity, new face if we can manage it." Michael nodded. He'd expected this. One breach was all it took. One mistake. One moment of humanity when the job demanded something else. "What about the king?" he asked. "What about him? Does he know? About the man in the kitchen? About any of it?" Davis picked up the gun from the counter, checked the safety, slipped it into her coat pocket. "The king doesn't know your name," she said. "He doesn't know you exist. That's the point." She walked to the door, paused. "You did good work, Michael. Dangerous work. The kind most people couldn't do." "That's not an answer." "No," she said. "It's not." She left. The door clicked shut. The lock, the cheap one a young man had mentioned, didn't catch properly. Michael didn't fix it. Ending line, he sat at the kitchen table until the tea was completely cold and the morning had turned to afternoon and the light through the window had shifted from gray to gold. He thought about the young man, about the sister in Istanbul, about the letter the soldier had handed him on the palace balcony. He thought about all the people who'd looked at him and seen someone else, all the hands he'd shaken, all the photographs he'd posed for, all the moments that belonged to a man who'd never know he existed. And he thought about the bullet hole in the kitchen window, the one that hadn't been there before, the one he'd noticed when he finally stood up to wash his cup. Small, circular, neat almost, like a period at the end of a sentence he hadn't known he was writing. Someone had fired a shot last night. Not the young man with a knife. Someone else. Someone who'd been watching from across the street. Someone who'd missed. Or maybe someone who hadn't. Maybe someone who'd wanted Michael to know, "We see you. We know where you sleep. This isn't over." Michael looked at the hole for a long time. Then he washed his cup, packed his bag, walked out the door without looking back. He didn't know where he was going. He never did. But he knew one thing for certain. The crown wasn't his. The danger was. Part 3 hooked the last time I saw Michael cross. He was buying oranges at a market in a city I couldn't name if you paid me. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a man who'd stopped trying to look like anything. Grayer, thinner, the kind of tired that lives in your bones, not your schedule. He saw me before I saw him. Of course he did. That was his job, seeing people who didn't want to be seen. He didn't run, didn't pretend he didn't know me. Just put down the oranges, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said, "You followed me." It wasn't a question. Set up 2 months had passed since the balcony. 2 months since the kitchen. 2 months of news cycles and royal scandals and a world that kept spinning like nothing had happened. The real king had made a public appearance last week. Christmas lights. Some hospital opening. The usual. I watched it on my phone while waiting for a train. He looked tired too. Or maybe that was just me projecting. I've been thinking about Michael a lot. More than was healthy. More than made sense for a man I'd seen for 10 minutes from 50 feet away. My sister noticed. She kept asking if I was okay. Kept telling me I seemed distracted. I told her it was work stress. She didn't believe me. Sisters never do. So I did something stupid. I started looking for him. Not officially. Not through channels. Just the way anyone looks for anyone these days. Social media. News archive. Old photographs of royal events scanned and magnified and stared at until my eyes hurt. It took 3 weeks to find a pattern. He'd been photographed 4 times in the last decade. Always in the background. Always half out of frame. Once at a state dinner in Paris. Once at a summit in Berlin. Twice at events in London where the king had been unwell and sent a representative instead. The representative. That was him. Always him. I found a photo from a hospital opening in Manchester. The king, the real one, was in a wheelchair recovering from some procedure the press had called routine. Standing next to him, helping him with a blanket, was a man in a dark suit. Michael, no doubt in my mind. The king's hand was on Michael's arm, gripping it. Not like a monarch gripping a servant, like a man gripping a lifeline. I printed the photo, tacked it to my wall, started making connections, and 6 weeks after the balcony, I found an address. Not his current one. He was too careful for that. But an old one, a flat in a city I'd never visited, connected to a name he'd stopped using years ago. I booked a train ticket before I could talk myself out of it. Build Tension the Market was in a neighborhood that didn't want to be found. Narrow streets, buildings that leaned into each other like old friends. The kind of place where people came to disappear. I'd been walking for an hour when I saw him. He was standing at a fruit stall, holding a net of oranges like he was trying to remember why he'd picked them up. His hair was longer. His face was thinner. He was wearing a wedding ring I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe it was new. Maybe he'd found someone. Maybe even ghosts could fall in love. I almost walked past, almost pretended I was just a tourist, just a stranger, just another face in the crowd. But I'd come too far for pretending. You followed me, he said. I nodded. Didn't apologize. Didn't explain. What was there to explain? That I'd become obsessed? That I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd taken that letter? That his face had replaced my dreams? He sighed, put the oranges back, pulled out a worn leather wallet, and paid the vendor without looking at the price. Walk with me, he said. We walked. The market gave way to residential streets. Apartments with tiny balconies. Laundry hanging in the breeze. A cat sleeping on a car hood, undisturbed by the world. Michael didn't say anything for a long time. Neither did I. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd already said everything important without opening their mouths. Finally, he stopped in front of a blue door. Number 14. The paint was peeling. The lock looked new. This is me, he said. Can I come in? He looked at me for a long time. Those eyes, the ones that had scanned the crowd for threats, that had watched a young man drop a knife, that had seen things I couldn't imagine. Why, he asked. It was a fair question. Because I need to understand, I said. What you did. What it cost. Why you're still here. Still alive, you mean? Still here. Still doing this. Whatever this is. Michael opened the door. Held it for me. You're not going to like the answer, he said. I didn't come here to like it. Climax the flat was small. 1 bedroom. A kitchen the size of a closet. Books everywhere, stacked on the floor, piled on the table, spilling off shelves that had given up years ago. Michael cleared a stack from a chair. Offered it to me. Sat on the arm of the sofa himself. You want to know what it cost, he said. Fine. He rolled up his left sleeve. The scar ran from his wrist to his elbow. A burn. Old but not ancient. The kind that came from something deliberate. Istanbul, he said. 3 years ago. The same bombing that killed the young man's sister. I was there. Not as the king. As myself. Doing a job I can't tell you about. He touched the scar. Not like he was remembering pain. Like he was checking it was still there. I pulled 17 people out of that building. 17. I remember every face. I remember the ones who lived and the ones who didn't. He looked at me. The young man in the kitchen, the one with the knife, he didn't know I was there. He didn't know I tried to save her. He just knew she was dead and someone had to pay. Did you tell him? No, why not? Michael stood up, walked to the window. The light through the glass made him look like a ghost, like someone already gone, still pretending. Because it wouldn't have helped, he said. He needed someone to blame. Someone to hate. If I took that away, he'd have nothing left. And nothing is worse than hate. Nothing is more dangerous. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? He turned around. His face was calm. Too calm. The calm of someone who'd made peace with things that should have broken him. The king doesn't know about any of this, he said. The bomb. The kitchen. The bullet hole in my window. He doesn't know my name. He doesn't know I exist. That's what Davis said. Davis is dead. The words landed like stones. Heavy. Final. 2 weeks ago, Michael said, "Quel accident." Or so they say. But there was no skid marks. No weaknesses. Just a car and a wall and a woman who knew too much. He sat back down. Closer this time. Close enough that I could see the gray in his stubble. The cracks in his lips. The small ways time had been unkind. You asked why I'm still here, he said. Still doing this. The answer is I don't know. I used to have reasons. Duty, honor, the money was good. But now he trailed off. Now I just don't know how to.